Thank you all for joining us today, and welcome to the final installment of our Loan Repayment 101 series. So today's session will be on federal consolidation and refinancing. My name is Lindsay Burcham, and I manage the Financial Wellness at Penn program. Today, I'm going to serve as a moderator throughout the workshop. Throughout the presentation, we'll pause periodically to answer questions submitted by the audience. So please feel free to direct your questions to me in the chat, and I'll direct them to Paul whenever we stop. So before I introduce our guest, I want to share a few disclaimers. First is that today's session will be recorded and the video will be hosted on our website later. If you don't want to be featured in the video, I'd recommend you leave your camera and mic muted, and then we'll share the video with all of you after the presentation. Additionally, I want to clarify that while today's session and this whole series is intended for graduate students, we do welcome any undergrad students in attendance, and we hope that today's workshop answers some of your questions about student loans and repayment after you graduate. So I'm pleased to introduce today's guest. Today's workshop will be led by Paul Gerard, founder and president of PG Presents LLC, which is an independent student loan consulting company. Paul is a well-renowned and respected student loan expert, especially in the graduate and health professions communities. We're very excited to have him with us again today to share his student loan expertise with all of you. So thanks for joining us, Paul, and I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Thanks, Lindsay. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. We know you guys are busy and these are quite challenging times, so we're glad that you're part of this. And my suspicion is that some of you may have been part of the other workshops we did on any number of topics, including the calculators and married borrowers, the income-driven repayment plans, and public service loan forgiveness. So as we go through this, we have a funny feeling there may be some general questions at the end, not specific to this topic, but we do want to kind of close out this series with very important discussion about loan consolidation and refinancing. As Lindsay's already mentioned, we want this to be as interactive as we possibly can, considering the circumstances. So all along, if you've got questions, just send them to Lindsay. Lindsay, I'm going to try not to look over there at them because I tend to want to go ahead and answer them. And then guys, we'll stop occasionally and field those questions, as many as possible. And then at the end, we'll give you guys a way to be sure to get any additional questions answered that you may think of after the workshop is over. So please send the questions in. We're glad to hear from you on that. Okay, if you've been to any workshop that I've ever done on any topic, regardless of the discipline, and the student financial services folks who are on the call have seen this slide time and time again, I always insert this at some point early on in a presentation, because with no offense to anybody on this call, none of this is going to make a lot of sense if you can't answer at least the first question, which is a bit of a three-parter. Guys, you just always need to know what kind of loans you have in your portfolio, who your loan servicer is, and a pretty good idea about when those loans are coming due. And that's never been easier. In terms of what you've borrowed, all the federal loans you have should be directly from the federal government. They're your lender. That's why they're called direct loans, direct unsub, direct plus, also called grad plus. Some of you may have some direct sub and unsub from college, and perhaps you've got some loans from a post-bac program as well. The who, the lenders, again, the government, but the who the servicer is, those are the organizations like Fed Loan Servicing, Great Lakes, Nelnet, Navient. There are a whole number of them. And as I think you already know, every year that you borrow, you tend to stay with the same servicer, which is one of the reasons you're not likely going to need to consolidate, as we're going to get into. And then when they come due, that's usually 6 months after graduation. So know what you borrowed, then kind of figure out how you want to go about this. Aggressive, do you want to try and hold back for public service loan forgiveness, which we talked about? And then you simply find a repayment plan, and that you can afford. We made a big deal about this in one of our earlier workshops, Lindsay, as you'll remember, where we said, whatever your strategy is, find a repayment plan with a minimum payment you can comfortably handle. Okay, so as we talk about federal consolidation versus private refinancing, I want to do a quick reminder of some of the basic differences between federal and private loans. And neither the SFS office nor yours truly, we have no dog in the fight in terms of what kind of borrowing you actually do, but clearly at the graduate and professional level, I'm sure you are aware you can cover up to the entire cost of attendance with a federal loan without needing a private loan while you're in grad school, kind of sort of the trend, if there is one. And I know Joe is with us, Joe Manning and Lindsay. Kind of the trend tends to be, if you're a grad student, consider borrowing federal loans. And then if you end up in the private sector afterwards, then you might want to consider refinancing with a private lender. The possible exception, I think we do have some folks from Wharton who are on. If you are in a position where your graduate program is a very short duration and you just know for a fact that you're not going to be going into the public sector, and you're really focusing on trying to get the lowest conceivable interest rate loan you can, that might be a time when you look at private loans to fund your grad school. But for the most part, those of you in veterinary medicine, dentistry, the grad school of arts and sciences, you tend to do federal first, private later. The interest rates on federal loans are fixed, variable, or some lenders are actually offering hybrid rates, which means they'll be fixed or variable for a designated period of time, and then they'll flip. That's something you can ask. But the federal loans have fixed rates. Now, you've seen I've highlighted some differences in red for a purpose. The repayment options, guys, again, I have no dog in this fight, but you've got multiple repayment options and postponement options with federal loans. Private loans, the repayment options are not going to be tied to your income. They are going to be tied to time levels, 10 years, 5 years, 12 years, et cetera, et cetera. More on that as we go. In terms of postponing private loans, kind of sort of good luck with that. It's going to vary by lender, and they may actually charge you a fee to postpone your loans. This is, by the way, a slide that, Lindsay, we tend to show folks when they are kind of figuring out how they're going to pay for school in general, not just trying to do we consolidate or refinance. The cancellation for death and disability, this is a huge one. For federal loans, I hope you know that in the unfortunate event of your death or disability, those loans are gone. It doesn't matter if you're married or have family, they're off the hook for that. That actually varies by lender. Now, with all due respect to the lenders, they have become much more competitive in offering cancellation benefits. So that's something that they've improved their terms on. In terms of, are these loans based on credit? Direct unsub? Absolutely not. And so think about this. If you're a dental school student or an allopathic student at Perelman or in the veterinary program, you can borrow $40,500 a year with just a signature. Those of you in other grad programs, I think public health, it's $33,000 a year. For other grad programs, it's $20,500. I hope I have those right. But guys, there's no credit. Those are not based on credit. And the credit requirement for Grad Plus is very, very minimal. So obviously, federal loans are very, very easy to get. Private loans are going to be in some form or fashion credit-based. Now, I added the CARES Act down there. I hope you know what's going on with this. If you've been on these sessions with us, you certainly do. The CARES Act comes along, and nobody was hoping for this pandemic, but when it hit and the CARES Act was passed into law, all of a sudden, anybody who had federally owned loans, and that certainly includes all the direct loans you guys have got, all of a sudden the interest rate went to zero on those. And borrowers who are in repayment, and that's not you guys, but your colleagues who already graduated from Penn with these loans, payments were just suspended. And folks trying to qualify for public service, they found that the suspended payments count for public service loan forgiveness. So the fact that you had federal loans, you got to benefit through the CARES Act. That's just not the case with private. So once again, those are some of the basic differences between federal and private loans. You kind of sort of, federal loans have it all over private, at least initially. Okay, so our topics are federal consolidation, refinancing. So let's look at these. Guys, keep this as simple as possible. All federal consolidation is, you just paying off a bunch of federal loans with one new one. I mean, that's for the exact same amount. Go back to, let's say, dentistry. Okay, 4-year program. Let's suppose you've got 4 direct unsubs. That's a pretty good guess. And let's say you've got 4 direct plus loans. Okay, you got 8 loans, all with the same servicer. They're all direct loans. Well, if you were to consolidate, those 8 loans go to zero. They just don't exist anymore. They'll show on your federal record paid in full through consolidation, and you'll have a brand new loan for the exact same amount. That's a direct consolidation loan. So all you're doing, you're trading debt for debt. Now, If you decide you want to do this after this presentation or after talking to FSS or looking at your own situation, if you decide to do it, you only got one option. You don't go look for a lender with federal consolidation. Remember, the government does all the loans. So if you're going to consolidate, it's going to be with the government in their direct consolidation loan program, where once again, the feds are the lender. Now you can choose your loan servicer. Let's suppose you've had Great Lakes and for some reason, you really like Great Lakes and you don't want to give up Great Lakes and you've got all these loans that they service, but you do want to consolidate. Well, when you consolidate, just pick Great Lakes as the servicer. The lender's the government, but you get to pick the servicer when you do this. Now look at that fourth bullet. I think this is going to become obvious. It may kind of sort of already be obvious. Most recent graduates, guys, you just don't need to consolidate. It's not that you're not eligible to. Many of you've got a whole bunch of loans, so you technically can do it. You just don't gain anything by doing it, as you're about to see. And I put, Lindsay and Joe, I added this bullet at the bottom, actually right before the presentation. There is still confusion over some of the loan, I say this as respectfully as I can, some of the loan servicers and just some bad information out there where borrowers who are interested in the public service loan forgiveness program think they've got to consolidate to get PSLF. That is just blatantly not true. If you were on the discussion we had on public service loan forgiveness, you know that the government forgives loans that they make. Well, guess what? Look at your portfolio. If you've got direct loans and that's what you do, they're already eligible. You don't need to consolidate to qualify for public service loan forgiveness. Okay, so why would somebody do this? What are the advantages and what are the disadvantages? Well, as we go through the advantages, I want you to think about your own portfolio of student loans. One advantage to consolidation is an obvious one. If you got 8 loans now and you consolidate, well, you've got the convenience of one loan servicer because you only have one loan. But look at your current situation. I don't know how many loans you guys have got, but I'm willing to bet they're already with one loan servicer. So that's an advantage you just may already have. Now look at the second one. One advantage to consolidation is if you've got some loans that are not in the direct loan program. Let me pick again on dentistry. If you're a dental school student and you happen to have a health profession student loan, that's a really good loan. We talked about those before, campus-based loans. Maybe you have a Perkins loan from college, and those are federal loans, but those are not direct loans. They're federal, but the government didn't make them. Well, if you consolidate, remember what happens. Those loans go to zero. They're paid in full and their balance becomes part of a direct loan program. It's part of the direct consolidation loan. Well, if that's the case, guess what now happens? Only direct loans can be repaid with the newest repayment plans, pay and repay. We talked about that on the previous workshops, in one of the previous workshops. And Lindsay, I hope it's okay to say, I think they're available online, or you emailed them to people. Is that right? You want to jump in here real quick on that?
Yeah, so I'll drop the link in the chat in a second,
Great.
but they're all available through our website. So I'll
That's
send
great.
it shortly. Thanks, Paul.
That's great. Thank you. Again, so one of the advantages of consolidation is if you've got some loans that are not direct and you're interested in repaying your whole portfolio with either pay or repay those good income plans, well, you might want to consolidate because it flips the balance. And if you're interested in public service loan forgiveness, well, guess what? Only direct loans are eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So here's a simple example. If you've got, this number is probably going to be crazy, but if you've got 20,000 in Perkins loans, maybe from college, I don't know if you could get that much or not, but humor me for a moment. You got 20,000 in Perkins loans, good loan, but not eligible for public service loan forgiveness. And maybe in dental school, you've got 40,000 in the health profession loan. Okay, again, that's a really good loan. But if you're thinking about public service loan forgiveness, those loans will never qualify. So that's when you might consider consolidation, because those non-direct loans go to zero and the balance is now flipped into the direct loan program. Kind of the theory there, guys, is if you're going to qualify for public service loan forgiveness, why in the world would you do it on your whole portfolio? The third advantage, although, guys, I don't know of anybody who's really ever, that I have worked with in my many years doing this, has done this. The longest you can take to repay a loan that's not consolidated is 25 years. So go back to one of our earlier sessions. If you said, look, I don't need income plans, I'm not interested in public service loan forgiveness, but it's just going to take me forever to pay my loans off. So I just want to set this up on a 25-year plan. And, I may or may not pay the thing off early. And you run the numbers in the 25-year plan, the payments are almost affordable, but not quite. You go, if I could just extend it 5 more years, I could afford the payments. Well, consolidation will let you extend it up to 30 years. I think as long as your balance is over 60,000, which most of you probably have got. And then this last one, and sorry guys, but we're going to get in the weeds here because some of you are going to be interested in this. We get asked this all the time, and I'm going to pick on Joe and his team here. You're going to get asked this over and over again, and I'm glad to help you guys with this. Borrowers who are interested in public service loan forgiveness want to start the clock early. I mean, it takes 120 payments to qualify, and you don't enter repayment until 6 months after you graduate. So we get asked a lot by graduates, can I go ahead right after graduation and start qualifying for public service loan forgiveness? And stay with me on this. The usual answer is, well, no, you got to wait till you officially enter repayment in the fall because you can't waive that 6-month grace period you've got on all these loans. Well, if you consolidated right out of school, I mean, right after graduation, consolidation loans don't have grace periods. They enter repayment immediately. So that's a way that you could start the PSLF clock earlier than the fall, if you are really interested in public service loan forgiveness and you think 6 months is going to make a big difference. So that is one advantage to consolidation. But look at the disadvantages and pay special attention to the first one. I have no idea how many of you are going to be aggressive in repayment, but I'm willing to bet more than a few of you will be. I think what you may end up doing is finding that plan with a comfortable payment and then overpaying either on small balance loans to pick them off. And Joe Manning and I had that discussion, and Joe, you mentioned that, and it's a great suggestion for some borrowers. Or you may say, look, I'm going to pay extra on the one with the highest interest rate. Well, guys, if you consolidate, you got one loan at one interest rate. Now you can overpay it with no penalty, but you just don't get quite the bang for your buck than if you left all the loans alone. Because once you go in and make that one payment on all your unconsolidated loans, remember what we said in an earlier workshop, that one payment is proportionately applied a little bit on each loan based on the rate and how much you borrowed. But if you go in and say, here's an extra $100, here's an extra $500, you pick which loan that extra money goes in. So you can't do that with consolidation. You get a slightly higher rate, but notice the footer there. Guys, the rates on all your loans are fixed. When you consolidate, you get a weighted rate and they round it up 1/8 of a point. That's only 0.125%. I have never had anybody not consolidate who really needed to because the rate was too high. The rate's going to be minuscule higher. Don't let that bother you. If you consolidate, bye-bye grace periods, but go back to what we said about public service loan forgiveness. If you want to start the clock early, you may not care about your grace periods. And those of you who do have Perkins, Health Profession Student Loans, HPSL, and loans for disadvantaged students, LDS, those are loans from the school. Those are called campus-based loans. They're really good loans at low interest rates, 5%. They're unsubsidized, those are subsidized loans. There's no interest in school, no interest in the grace period. These are great loans if you've got them. If you consolidate those, the balance becomes an unsubsidized balance. So you got pros and cons to consolidation. And here's how I would look at it if you're trying to decide if you should or shouldn't. And this is just another way, Lindsay, of stating what we just did on the earlier slides. You may be a candidate if you've got multiple loan servicers. I kind of sort of doubt you do, but if you do, well, then you might be a candidate to consolidate. You might be a candidate if you've got some non-direct loans and you want to use pay or repay on the whole portfolio. And you just don't want that extra payment on a Perkins. You don't want that extra payment on a health profession student loan or an LDS. You just want one payment period. You might also be a candidate if, like we said, you've got some non-direct loans, excuse me, and you're interested in public service loan forgiveness because only direct loans qualify. And you might be a candidate if for some reason 25 years just isn't enough and you want to extend it out to 30. But you may not be a candidate, and here we go. If you already have one loan servicer, which is probably most all of you on this call, if your entire federal student loan portfolio is in the direct loan program, I'm willing to bet that for the majority of you, that's you. and you're not looking to extend your repayment term. So what I think you're kind of sort of hearing is, guys, most of you, you just don't need to go anywhere near consolidation. Years ago, real quickly, years ago, interest rates were variable. This is way back before 2006. They went up and down every year on the same loan. And when the loan interest rates went really, really low, borrowers tried to consolidate to lock that rate in. Well, that's just not the case anymore because all your interest rates are fixed. So if you do decide you want to do this, again, your lender's the government. There's only one place to do it, studentaid.gov/consolidation. That'll take you right to it. There's an online application and promissory note. And one thing I think you will find that the feds have done a pretty good job of is if you decide to consolidate, when you go in and go to the, online application, all the federal loans that are at the studentaid.gov site under the dashboard that we've talked about, those will be pre-populated right into the application. Now, if you've got loans like federal loans like health profession student loans or LDS loans, those aren't going to be on there. You'll have to add them manually. But when you go to the site, all your federal loans are already dumped in. They're really easy. You just check off a box and say, yes, these are the ones I want consolidated. Remember, you get to choose the loan servicer, and this is extremely important. This is important whether you consolidate or not, actually. When you go in to consolidate, you're going to choose the servicer, but you actually choose your repayment plan at the same time. And the similarity with not consolidating is you choose the plan. For goodness sakes, don't check the box that says let the loan servicer choose the plan for you. You guys are smarter than that. That's why we do these workshops, so you can make the choice. The process generally takes about 3 to 6 weeks, and the process simply means all your loans currently being paid to zero and being replaced with the new loan on the new loan servicer's website. But guys, that's 3 to 6 weeks in a normal circumstances, and we're in anything but. I would kind of sort of hope though that by the time you guys graduate, I don't know what year you guys are, probably all over the place, things will kind of sort of semi be back to normal and consolidation. It really is not a big ordeal. Pretty easy to do, 3 to 6 weeks. But a reminder, you can't consolidate now. So if you're going, oh, this sounds good, this is something I should do. Well, you can't do it while you're in school. You got to be in grace or repayment status. Okay, Lindsay, let me stop there before we talk about refinancing and see if that covered everything or if we have any questions come in.
Thanks, Paul. So nothing has come in so far. Maybe we give it a minute to see if folks want to send anything my way.
Great.
Oh, one just came through.
Right.
So one student says, while most of my loans are direct loans and under the same servicer, if you have 8 loans when they become due, won't you have to make minimum payments on each of them? So by consolidating, you could reduce that to just one that you have to pay towards, and the rest can be extra.
Yeah, great question, Lauren. One of the things we covered on an earlier session, and that's okay, you may not have missed it, and we threw a lot of stuff at you guys. The thing about having all your loans with one servicer, it's a great question, Lauren. They most all offer what's called combined or single billing. And I really briefly went through this. So let me see if I can explain it a little bit better. Let's suppose you do have, I don't know what your degree program is, but let's just say you've got a 4-year program and you've got 4 direct and sub, and you referenced 8 loans and 4 grad plus. Okay, but they're all with the same servicer. When those loans come due, whatever plan, Lauren, that you pick, doesn't matter if it's a time plan or an income plan, you're going to make one payment. You don't make an individual payment on each loan. You make one payment, and the loan servicer applies that payment, Lauren, proportionately a little bit on each loan based on how much the loan was and what the rate is. Let's use a simple example because I'm bad with math. You said 8 loans. Let's suppose that your monthly payment under, Lauren, whatever loan repayment plan you pick is $800. How's that for easy math? Okay, the servicer doesn't take your one $800 payment and put $100 on each loan. It's not an even split. It might be 90 on one, 110 on another. Maybe it's 130 something on one of your higher rate grad plus loans. Maybe it's $60 on one of your lower rate direct unsub. It's one payment of $800. And so you've got the convenience of making one payment. You do not have to make 8 individual payments. That's one of the reasons we say that since all of your loans are with one servicer, or probably are, you've already got the convenience of one payment. You don't have to consolidate to get that. Lauren, does that help? Does that make any sense?
Thanks for that answer, Paul. I'm wondering, since that came up, could you elaborate on what options students have if they want to make extra payments toward their loans? Can they choose where that goes?
Yeah, absolutely. If remember, once you've made whatever your plan is, 10-year, 25-year, pay, repay. Once you've made that minimum payment, we go back again and say this, find a payment plan where the required minimum you can comfortably handle, whatever that means to you. Once you decide that, okay, this month I can put an extra $100, maybe next month it's $200, maybe the next month you can't do anything. But when you go in and pay, contact your loan servicer, have your account up and online, and they will show you where you do it. You actually go in, and Lizzie, as you may know, some of the loan servicers have a drop-down menu that lets you choose where that extra money is going to be posted. And guys, you actually do this yourself. So one option is to pick the loan with the highest interest rate and pay that puppy down faster. That's what many borrowers would do. That in almost all cases is going to be a Grad Plus loan. Now, I mentioned picking on Joe Manning again, we had a great discussion of this in training. Every once in a while, we'll see a borrower say, look, I just want to get rid of a loan so I can say I've gotten one paid off, just psychologically to say that I've done that. And so occasionally a borrower will pay off a smaller balance loan, Lindsay, that has a lower interest rate just because they want to be able to check off and get one paid in full before they move on to the next one. So great questions all around.
Perfect. Thanks for that. I haven't had anything else come in. So if you want to move on to
Okay.
refinancing.
All right. Hang on one second. I have a nosy golden retriever who I thought was interested in the workshop, but clearly he's not. So he just had to open the door and leave. Okay, so let's now talk about refinancing. Now, guys, in theory, this is exactly the same as consolidation, but some huge differences. The way it's similar is that it's trading debt for debt. Now, in this case, refinancing, you'd be paying off multiple federal and or private loans with one new private loan for the exact same amount. So to Lauren, just pick on you since I see your chat there. Let's say you got 8 direct unsub and you got 8 Grad Plus, and you go, why am I paying this ridiculous interest rate on these loans? Okay, bad time of year to be saying that since the rate is 0, and this year the statutory rates are 4.3 and 5.3. But you know what I mean? The rates on these federal loans are not real good. So you go, oh, I want to just get rid of these. I'm not going to do public service. I don't need an income plan. I just want to lower the interest rate on my loan. And so you pay off all 8 loans, but you don't do it with federal consolidation. You do it with a private lender. And if you happen to have some private loans, and for most of you, my guess is if you do, it's going to be private loans from college or a post-bac program. You can include those if you want to. So it's trading debt for debt. You're just trading it for a private loan, not a federal loan. Now, there are multiple lenders available for refinancing. As Joe and all the folks at Penn know, we're a completely objective company. We're not in bed with any lenders. We don't recommend individual lenders. Our kind of job is to help you know if you're a candidate to even consider refinancing. And then, as you're going to see in a moment, what kind of questions you should be asking if you do decide you want to go and refinance your loans. Now, clearly, I'm going to state the obvious here. The bait is the rate, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, these lenders want you to give them your debt, and in exchange for that, for them getting the debt, they'll try to get you a significantly lower interest rate. More on that here in just a moment. Now, again, I'm not speaking on behalf of all the lenders, but guys, in general, these refinance private loans are going to be based on credit, meaning credit score, your what they call DTI, debt to income ratio, and your employment history. They may have varying degrees of what's more important to some lenders than others. In the past, there were some lenders who would loan only to certain disciplines. I'm not aware of that still going on, but it might be. But those are the 3 things you need to at least be aware they're going to look at: credit, debt to income ratio, and employment history. You can expect those things to be part of the quote equation when they're looking at whether or not they want to give you a private loan. Okay, and before I forget, Lindsay and Joe, remind me, and if you don't already have it, and I think you may, I would say this to everybody who's on the call. We have an extremely comprehensive, it's like 3.5, 4 pages long document that takes this and expands it a lot. And the document, it's a PDF, but the document is, number one, how to go in and determine if you really should do this or not, and if so, when you should do it. And then it gets into a lot of detail on these questions that you should ask the lenders before you take the plunge. So these are some questions to ask any private lender you're considering refinancing with. Some of these are obvious, guys, some of them are not. Okay, the thing that everybody wants to know is interest rate, because that's what that's the main reason you're considering doing this. Once again, the lenders are going to offer fixed rates, variable rates. In some cases, they may offer a hybrid rate. That's actually relatively new. Okay, a fixed rate is a fixed rate, never ever going to change. And for the record, although we work with thousands and thousands of borrowers, but the reality is, Lindsay, the number we work with is a subset of an afterthought of how many are out there. I mean, for example, we work with thousands of medical and dental school graduates and veterinarians, but there are a bajillion more out there that we would never talk to. What we're seeing is that more and more folks are taking fixed rates, even though the fixed rate tends to be a little bit higher, because they know they can overpay with no penalty, and they kind of sort of don't like the fact that the rate could go up. So they're a little more comfortable taking a slightly higher rate, knowing it's never going to go up. But it's your choice. Are you risk averse or not? But guys, this is really important. If you're enticed to take a variable rate loan, and there's nothing wrong with doing that, there's some real important questions you need to ask. Okay, those of you who are on the call, if you're from Wharton, you should be doing this, probably not me, because you can probably explain this better than I can. But on a variable rate loan, you need to know what the index is and what the spread is. Well, what in the world do we mean by that? I do have this footed down at the bottom. I can never even remember what LIBOR stands for. I mean, I guess I could, but let's say, for example, you do a pre-approval with a lender, and lender A goes, we'll give you a rate, a variable rate of LIBOR plus 4. Okay, LIBOR is the index that goes up and down. That's what creates the variable loan. The plus 4, that's what's called the spread. And in most all cases, the spread is never going to change. So the rate they give you in this example is LIBOR plus 4. Okay, if LIBOR is 3, your rate's 7. If LIBOR is 4, your rate is 8. The spread never changes. So find out what the index is and what the spread is. And the next one is just common sense. Is there a maximum of how high this thing can go? And is there what's called a floor? I mean, if it's based on LIBOR and LIBOR drops, how low can your rate go? Now, this will tell you how old I am, but years ago when I worked with dental students way back at Georgetown and Emory University, I remember when the maximum rates were in the 18, 19%. I mean, it was just really stupid. So find out what the maximum minimum rates are if you're doing a variable rate loan. Then look at the next two, hugely important. If you got a variable rate loan, how often is that puppy going to be reset? Now, it's usually going to be reset monthly or quarterly. But then, yes, thank you, Lindsay. I could have figured that out, but I appreciate you saying London Interbank offered rate. Okay, there we go. Thank you. Okay, so if it's going to be a variable rate, you need to know how often is that thing going to change, and then how much notice are you going to be given when the rate changes, and what is the impact going to be on subsequent payments? Now, this will probably insult everybody's intelligence, but think about this for a moment. If you're paying, I don't know, $500 a month on your private loan, and the rate is, LIBOR plus 4, and you're paying $500 a month, and all of a sudden LIBOR goes up. Well, now you need to know, number one, you need to know that happened. But number two, you need to know, okay, are they going to keep, the lender, are they going to keep my payments the same and force me to catch up at the end of repayment with significantly higher payments to accommodate that rate increase? Or, listen carefully, are they going to redisclose to me a brand new repayment disclosure that says, oh, your monthly payments have now changed to the following to accommodate the interest rate increase? So long and short of it, guys, especially if you're using an automatic debit off your account to pay these things, you need to know what kind of notice you get of that rate change and what is the impact going to be on subsequent payments. Hugely important. So that's on interest rates. That's one of the basic questions you're going to ask. Clearly, you're going to ask about repayment options. I already mentioned this earlier. I say this is current as of right now. For all I know, some of the private lenders are going to figure out a way to do some kind of income plans. Maybe some of them have. I've not seen them. There's certainly nothing like the income plans with the feds. but you need to expect the plans to be time-driven plans. And what I have seen is this is kind of like a mortgage. The shorter the term you agree to, the better rate you might get. And the terms I've actually seen with private lenders tend to be 5 years, 8 years, 10, 12, 15, and up to 20, maybe longer, but 20 is about the max I've ever seen. And again, the shorter the time period, the better the rate. Now, you guys are way ahead of me on this as well. If you do a really short repayment period, you're just going to save a boatload of interest. But I don't care how low that rate got, your monthly payment's going to be a disaster. So I would encourage you not to back yourself into a corner. And if you qualify for a refinance loan, take an insanely low rate over a 5-year period that gives you, yes, tremendous interest rate savings, but where the required payment is just stupid high each month. Find something that has a comfortable required payment, overpay with no penalty if you want to. So questions to ask, interest rates and repayment options. Here's several others. You do want to ask about postponement options, although this one is probably not as important because once you are in repayment, the theory kind of sort of is you got your job. Hopefully it's going to be secure. You're probably not going to be able to, not going to need to postpone your payments. Although, I'm saying that right in the middle of the, coronavirus pandemic when people are losing jobs, et cetera. So you do want to ask, if push came to shove and you had to, could you postpone? But then there are 2 questions under that to ask. Is there a fee to postpone payment? There never is with a federal loan. And does interest capitalize when you do postpone your payments? Now, guys, I am not picking on Sally Mae here. I used to work there. I had a blast there when I worked there many, many years ago. But, and I don't know if they've changed this policy or not, but one thing Sally Mae used to do, and I suspect other private lenders did it as well, is that a borrower who'd used up all their postponement, they could forbear, they could postpone their payments, but they had to do it in 3-month increments. And there was a fee of $50 per loan, up to a maximum of 3 for every loan they postponed payment on, and interest capitalized at the end of each 3 months. So yes, you can do it, but boy, is it going to cost you. So find out if you had to, what kind of postponement options. Find out, they will tell you if you need to get a cosigner. But even if you don't need to get a cosigner, if you can get one, what would that mean to the rate? But also find out, is there a cosigner release? And many of you have heard this phrase before. If not, it's very simple. If you have a private loan and you have a cosigner on it, most private lenders will let you drop the cosigner, which he or she will greatly appreciate. After you've made a designated number of payments, it's usually, guys, 24 or 36. It doesn't happen automatically, but Lindsay, you probably notice what they do is, they go to the lender and they go, okay, I've made my 24 or 36 payments on time. I'd like to apply to take over this loan and drop my cosigner, because these private loans, if you've got a cosigner, that shows on their credit report. So find out about cosigner. Ask about pre-approval and the impact on credit. By and large, you're going to find that a pre-approval does not adversely impact your credit. They do what's called a soft pull, not a hard pull. The hard pull happens when the full application goes through, but you should still ask them. And then this is the kind of thing just drives me crazy, but I guess I've been doing this too long. I go on these websites, and I mean, I don't kind of blame them because it's marketing, but you see the, cost savings of, $50,000 or $13,000 and I think, what assumptions are you using with these numbers? So if you go on a website and you see projected savings and you happen to call and talk to the private lenders, tell them what you've borrowed and have them run projected savings on your portfolio. Don't take what's on their website. That's not, you don't care what anybody else is doing. You care about your own portfolio and what you're going to save. And then the last thing down there, for goodness sakes, ask about the forgiveness provisions. I referenced this on that first comparison chart, Lindsay, that I showed you guys. Find out about the provisions of death and disability. And if you do have a cosigner, in the event of your death or disability, are they going to go after the cosigner? Now, score 1 for the private lenders. I know of several private lenders who no longer go after the cosigner if something happens to you. So those are some basic kind of questions to ask. So as we kind of wrap this up here, and I figured we'd have ample time for this workshop, some considerations or things to think about. And I guess I should have put this on 2 slides. Sorry, I hope you can read this, okay? It's a lot of text. Just remember that if you're going to be aggressive in repayment, that may actually negate a reason to refinance with a private lender. And see if this makes sense. I hope I explained this well. Let's suppose you look at your career and your potential income and maybe your marital status and family status, and you look at your student loan debt and you go, I know unless there's manna falling from heaven, it's going to take me 15 years to pay this debt off. Now, that's not too bad, actually, but you say, okay, it's going to take me 15 years. Okay, then you, excuse me, then you really should probably look at refinancing because the cost savings of a lower interest rate play out the longer you hold the loan. But if you met with me and you said, I'm planning to pay this thing off in 3 or 4 years, well, I'd have to ask a whole lot of other questions. But then to me, you might just want to keep the debt federal with all the protections just in case, because if you're going to aggressively pay the debt off, guys, the best way to negate a high interest rate is to do what? Pay the loan fast. So if you're going to be real aggressive, I'm not sure you need to refinance. You can hold on that loan a while. Then Joe and Lindsay, I think that's a reason they really should consider refinancing. And again, just kind of carefully weigh the repayment flexibility, of federal loans against the cost savings of the private lender. And I see a few more questions coming in that we'll get to. Thank you for sending those in. So that's kind of basically the gist of this thing. What are you going to give up with federal loans when you consolidate, when you refinance, and what are you going to get in terms of an interest rate? Because look at that third bullet. Guys, you cannot undo this. I'm not trying to scare anybody here, but once you do it, once you refinance, those federal loans are gone. I mean, they're just gone. Okay, look at bullet 4. This has come up several times. If you're listening in on this call, and Joe and Lindsay, when you guys talk to the students about this is something that may come up. Let's suppose that in undergrad, you did your federal borrowing, but you may remember this, those of you who had federal loans in college, the limits were not anywhere near what they are with grad. And so maybe you borrowed as much federal loan as you could and you still needed more money and you took out a private loan in college. And let's suppose that's a stupid high rate. I mean, like 8 or 9%. You go, this is just ridiculous. And you postponed it while you're at Penn in grad school. And that interest rate, it just keeps on accruing. It's not impacted by the CARES Act, and that loan's just growing like a weed. But you got all these federal loans from Penn, and you kind of sort of like all the provisions of the federal loans. So something you might consider doing is just refinancing the loans from college and leave the federal loans from grad school, leave those alone. That's not a bad strategy at all. Okay. But because you can't take, I don't know if anybody's going to ask this or not, you can't take private loans and consolidate them in the federal direct consolidation loan program. And then this last thing down here, if you sat in on the Married Borrowers Workshop and/or the workshop on income-driven repayment plans, remember what we said, that if you are married and you are using an income plan and you are married filing jointly, and/or you're using Repay, which always counts spousal income. If you're using an income plan, guys, and your spouse's income is being counted in the calculation of your payment, but your spouse has federal student loans, those federal student loans factor into how much your monthly payment is. But as soon as your spouse goes off on his or her own and refinances their federal loan debt with a private lender, that may be good for them, but your monthly payment with your federal loans is going to jump up because private student loan debt of a spouse cannot be factored into the repayment calculation. I see we have some friends from dental school on, and I won't call names, but I think you guys know who you are. This has come up several times where I got a call from a dental school graduate we were working with, and it went, why in the world did my monthly payment go up? And we looked at it and looked at it. The income hadn't changed that much. And what had happened is their spouse had gone off and refinanced, their debt, their significant amount of debt with a private lender. And all of a sudden that can't be factored in. So guys, be a little cautious there. Be sure you're having conversations with the other half if he or she has student loans. So Lindsay, that's going to do it. Let's stop and see what kind of questions we've got.
Great. So far, the only one that's come in has been the one in the main chat. So can you refinance only some of your federal loans and keep others as federal still?
Yeah, the answer to that is yes. Now, the private lenders are probably going to want all of them. I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I can't imagine they're not going to want all of them. I would say, Laura, who asked the question, a great question. I would have a serious sit down with somebody about why you would want to do that. I'm not suggesting that might not be in some cases to your benefit to do that, but that is a little bit unusual. So that's a question that before you do that, you might want to sit down with Joe or his team, and just kind of explain your rationale behind that. But the answer to that is yes, absolutely.
That's all I've received so far. So I'm going to go ahead and do my little closing thought.
Okay.
And if anyone else has questions, please send them and we'll address them now. But thanks again for joining us today. And we hope we were able to answer some of your pressing questions about your student loan repayment options, specifically refinancing and consolidation. We would greatly appreciate it if you would complete the evaluation. Paul, would you mind switching to that?
Sure.
Yeah, there's the link. We will also share this with you via email after the workshop is over, as well as a link to sign up for our newsletter so you can receive reminders about workshops that we're hosting next semester. So again, we'll follow up via email after, with the recording, with the slides, the evaluation link, and the link to sign up for our newsletter. So thanks again for joining us. If there are other questions, please send them our way and we'd be happy to answer.
You guys were great. Thank you very, very much. And good luck to all of you guys. Please stay safe. Maybe I'll see you in person one of these days.
Oh,
Oh, we have a
go
question. Okay.
ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to stay on here. Let me see. Typically, would a student refinance right after school grace period or wait until more financially secure? No, the variation varies with situation. It really does. Here's kind of the way I approach that, Stu, is that once the borrower graduates and is pretty sure, that they are going to land in or have already landed in the private sector, and they're pretty comfortable that they're going to stay in the private sector, then that's when somebody should seriously consider, I think, refinancing. Now, let's compare, since you asked, let's compare dentistry and medicine. A dental school graduate, the career path, you know this far better than I do, is likely going to be in the for-profit sector. That doesn't mean they couldn't go into academic dentistry or a nonprofit, community-based dental clinic or something. But if they go into the private sector and that's where they're pretty sure they're going to land, then to me, the legitimate question is, okay, do I need an income plan? Because public service loan forgiveness is now off the table. I'm working for the private sector. So am I in a situation where I want the comfort of knowing that I've got the protections of federal, or do I look at my portfolio, which for many dentists, as you know, is pretty significant, and go, my interest rate, overall rate is stupid. I need to go ahead and look at refinancing that. Now, the colleagues from Perlman, minimum residency 3 years, many of them doing subspecialties, the tendency, and you're right, Stu, there are all sorts of nuances to this, but the tendency for a medical school graduate would be, well, I'm going to need an income plan probably in residency because my stipend compared to my debt is pathetic. And I'm not really sure yet where I'm going to land as an attending physician. And 97% of the teaching hospitals are nonprofit. So I'm going to use an income plan, kind of keep public service loan forgiveness on the table. And then when I see my career path becoming clearer and I land in, or know I'm going to land in the private sector, that's when I'd consider refinancing as an attending physician. Sue, that same theory would apply to someone doing a 1-year GPR or a 2-year pediatric residency. Does that make sense, I hope? Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so we got a few more questions. Lindsay, if you're still on, Ron, you feed them to me here.
Yeah, so this one's not necessarily a question, but John, who actually works in grad nursing financial aid, he just shared as an example of a reason a student might not want to consolidate all of their Fed loans together. Perkins loans are forgivable for nurses, but not if they're consolidated. That's a really great point, John.
Absolutely. Great point, John. And that actually brings up another, I guess, kind of point about, should you or should you not refinance or consolidate campus-based loans. Again, there are all sorts of nuances here. But if a borrower had, for example, a $4,000 Perkins loan from college, well, with all due respect, that's a 5% loan. It's got a 9-month grace period that's interest-free. it's a 10-year plan, but the payment's 40 or 50 bucks a month. I'm not so sure it'd be worth giving that up and consolidating that. But we run into borrowers all the time who've got, 20,000 in Perkins loan. Okay, well now all of a sudden that 10-year payment's about 200 some odd dollars. And, that's not an insignificant payment on top of everything else. So John, you're right. It's really individual. You got to look at what the situation is. In the case of a nurse, you're right. There's forgiveness programs available there. I see another one that came in, I think right above that. Let's see, Laura, is that right? I'm going to read this here. I don't know if she's still on or not.
Yeah, I'm still on. This is like maybe more personal, so if there are other questions, but just you had said, refinancing part of your federal loans may not make sense, but I do have a pretty wide variety of interest rates. So some are 4%, some are 7, up to 7%. So would thinking about some of the higher interest rates and refinancing those loans, would that make sense?
Yeah, I see where you're going down. I have to look at my cheat sheet because for example, this year again, and I'm sure you know this, the rates right now are 0, and that's been extended through the end of January, of next year, and who knows, it might go even further. But when the rates for this year, Laura and everyone, revert back to what they're supposed to be, what we call the statutory rates, it's going to be 4.3 and 5.3, which is for federal loans, that's not bad at all. But for example, in 2018-19, the rates were 6.59 and 7.59. Okay, so those are kind of sort of stupid high. So if that's kind of what you're getting at, sure, it might be worth taking a look at keeping some of those, alone because they're fixed rates, and refinancing the higher rate loans. The only caution, Laura, I would say to that, clearly you're on top of this, and for you, probably keeping track of that would not be a problem. But just remember, if for some reason you landed in the public sector all of a sudden and you went, now what was that thing about public service loan forgiveness? And guys, I don't want to get sidetracked on this, but I firmly believe in the next couple of years, it's Katie bar the door. You're going to see all sorts of folks qualifying at huge amounts. All of a sudden, Laura, you're going to go, I can't do that on the private refinance loan. So great question. It's really, really quite individual. I'm glad you asked that.
One quick follow-up is that, so if you consolidate it into one federal loan, it would be this year's rate, which is that lower rate? Is that?
Yeah, they take the rate, they take the rate of all the loans you're consolidating, and they give what's called a weighted or blended rate. Simple example, if you're consolidating, you've got $100,000 and 80,000 of that is at 7%, which it's not, but humor me. Yeah, 80,000 of it is at 7%, and the other 20 is at 3%. Well, the rate on your weighted new consolidation loan is going to be a lot closer to 7. Obviously, that's what a weighted rate is. So that's how that works.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you so much. This was really.
And by the way, somebody asked, and I don't blame them, said, okay, with the rate 0, if I consolidated now, do I get a 0 rate on my consolidation loan? No, that's not the way it works. So.
Thanks,
Great
Paul.
question.
Those are all the questions I've seen come through.
Okay, cool. Well, hey guys, thanks. Please be safe. It was a pleasure to have you, Sue. Thanks for joining us, and all the folks in the Student Financial Services. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks,
Okay,
everyone.
bye-bye.
Bye.